Okay, so we've got physical constraints, but Norman also talks about these other types of constraints, like semantic and logical. Let's break those down a bit, shall we?
Sure, let's do it.
So semantic constraints, those are all about the meaning, right? Like if something looks a certain way, we assumed it's used a certain way because of what we already know about the world.
Exactly. It's how our understanding of things influences our interactions with them. Like take a motorcycle's handlebars, for instance.
Okay, yeah, handlebars.
You wouldn't even think of putting them on backward because, well, it just wouldn't make any sense, right? Our brains instantly tell us, nope, that's not right, based on what handlebars are and how we know they're supposed to work. That's a semantic constraint in action.
Ah, so it's like those constraints are working behind the scenes, guiding us even when we don't realize it.
Exactly. And then you've got logical constraints, which are more about, well, logic. It's like when you're putting together a puzzle and you're down to that last
There's
piece.
only one place it can go, right?
Exactly. It just makes sense logically. And good design uses those same logical principles to guide us toward the correct action.
So it's all about giving those subtle hints that make things click for the user. Like instead of a million different ways to use something, there's really just one obvious way because the design leads you right to it.
Yeah. Precisely. Constraints actually make things more intuitive to use, not less.
Constraints are our friends, not our enemies. I like that.
They absolutely are.
Okay, and this brings us to another biggie in the world of design signifiers. Those are the little things, the visual cues that basically scream, hey, this is how you use me.
Oh, signifiers, they're so important and we don't even realize it until they're missing.
Totally. And then we're left wondering what to do.
Exactly. And Norman gives this hilarious but also kind of frustrating example in his book about a sink he encountered in a London hotel.
Oh, no, a sink.
Yeah.
What could be so complicated about a sink?
Right. Well, it turns out to get this particular sink to drain, you had to push down on the stopper.
Push down instead of pulling up.
Yep, you got it. And there was absolutely nothing, no visual cue whatsoever to indicate that this sink was anything but normal.
Oh, no. Poor guy probably thought he was going crazy. That's the gulf of execution in a nutshell. You know what you want to do, but the design gives you absolutely zero clues on how to make it happen.
It's like the designers forgot they were designing for actual humans. But it just goes to show how crucial those seemingly insignificant details of signifiers really are. Labels, symbols, even the shape of an object, they all play a role in communicating its function.
It's like a secret language that good design speaks fluently.
I like that, a secret language of design.
Right. Okay, so speaking of shapes and how things are arranged, this whole concept of natural mapping, which Norman talks about, absolutely blew my mind, especially when it comes to stovetops.
Oh, stovetops. Don't get me started on stovetops.
Right. Why is it that even the most experienced cooks among us sometimes find themselves standing there for a minute, totally bewildered, trying to figure out which knob controls which burner? It's like a design conspiracy, I swear.
It's because they line those burners up in a nice, neat little square,
Yeah.
right? And then, for some inexplicable reason, they put the controls in a straight line.
It defies all logic. And you know Norman doesn't hold back. He calls it a recipe for disaster, especially when you're in the middle of cooking and trying to wrangle multiple dishes at once. It's like the design is working against you, setting you up for failure.
And it all boils down to the fact that the controls don't map directly onto the burners, which creates this mental disconnect.
You've got a two-dimensional surface, but you're trying to control it with a one-dimensional line of knobs. It just doesn't compute. It's like giving someone a map that's oriented to the north, but they're trying to use it while they're facing east. It might be technically accurate, but it's just not user-friendly in the slightest.
And the solution is so simple. Just arrange those controls in a pattern that mirrors the layout of the burners. It seems so obvious, yet so many designers miss the mark.
Right. It's all about creating that intuitive connection between the controls and their effects. But I guess sometimes the simplest solution isn't always the cheapest or the easiest to manufacture, which, as Norman points out, is often a factor in bad design.
Sadly, it often comes down to cost cutting.
But you have to wonder, at what cost? Because when you really think about it, bad design has its own set of costs. The frustration, the mistakes, the sheer waste of time.
Not to mention the mental anguish.
Right. It takes a toll. So in the long run,
Yeah.
it seems like investing in good design would actually save everyone a lot of headaches.
Absolutely. And this goes way beyond just kitchen appliances.